Okay, this is today we're doing part two of Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Still talking about Yoshon, but last time we spoke about Yoshon Chadash malt. Today we're going to talk about something different. So let me just give a drop, a reminder from last time, just what we said. Some things that are relevant for today. First is the din is that if something is Davar Sheyesh Matirim, something that's issur today but tomorrow it's going to become mutter, then it can't become Bitul. And one of the important details of that is that that's only if it's min mino. If it's min b'she'eni mino, then it's Bitul. Okay. Last time we also saw the Gemara says that Chadash is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Chadash is any of the 5 grains from that never went through a Pesach. It's issur because it's issur to eat now, and when Pesach comes, it'll become mutter. So it's a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, and after a certain amount of time, it becomes mutter. Last time we spoke about malt, which comes from barley, and how that affects and where that maybe is or is not Bitul. Today we're going to talk about 2 very connected things. I'm going to do them together because they're so connected. They are how do you create Yoshon flour? How do you mill Yoshon flour? And how do you pearl Yoshon barley? Okay, just to explain barley. What we buy, the barley you have in your house, is barley that's been pearled. Pearl means they take off an outer layer that's not edible for humans. People don't eat it. So if it has barley or pearl barley, it's all the same thing. Okay, but there's you have to do it. You scrape off this outer layer to give you just the inner part that is what we want to eat. Okay, so when you want to have Yoshon barley or flour, so one way to get it is you find out the bag of flour or the bag of barley that was produced before there was any chadash in the market. Let's say like right around now, in this time of the year. Now it's July, so there's the Chadash stuff hasn't come to market, or has not come to the market yet. So if you come Hanukkah and you find a bag that was produced today, then you know that bag is going to be it's going to be Yoshon because it was made long before there was any Chadash in the market. It hadn't come to market yet. Okay, it doesn't come to market for like another month from now, so there won't be anything in the market. Okay, so that's safe. That's very safe. The problem is that after a certain amount of time, that stuff gets buggy. So it's halacha you don't have bugs in your food, and quality-wise, it's not so great. So it's not most places that produce, that give Hashgachah or that this is Yoshon, are not doing that. That's not what they're doing. They're not holding stuff from now in the summer all the way till next Pesach, okay? Because it won't last. Like I'm talking about like flour and barley. I'm not talking about like cookies. I'm talking about flour and barley kernels. They do not do that. There are some places like local establishments that will buy bags and refrigerate them. That you could do because that keeps it from getting buggy. But you can only do so much. If you're a manufacturer, that's not realistic. You're not going to refrigerate all this stuff. Okay, so what do they do? So how do they make it? What they do is they keep the barley and the wheat kernels in their raw in their as the grain itself, that can be stored for years. That doesn't have any problems with it if it's taken care of properly. And then when they're ready to make the Yoshon flour on Purim time, then they grind it at that point. They make it at that point. Okay, and the problem is going to be at that point. Of course, there's lots of chadash in the factories, and since there's lots of chadash in the factories, how do you make sure you don't get any of the chadash into the Yoshon? That's the issue we're trying to deal with. Now, just as a little bit of an aside, is that there's something. People eat Yoshon, there's something called winter wheat. It's planted Sukkot time, and it doesn't get harvested until long after Pesach, till the summertime. So it's always Yoshon. So it's true that it's always Yoshon. The problem is that winter wheat is also made in the same factories that they make spring wheat. Also, they do the processing is the same. So the same shiloh that we have, which is how do you make it? Make sure that there's no chadash mixed into it, applies to the winter wheat also. Really, that's the truth, because it has the same. It goes through the same issues we're going to talk about today. Apply to them also. Okay, so what's the question? In order to make wheat into flour, you don't just grind up the kernels. Okay, it gets passed through. I should have counted how many steps. I'm going to read you off all the steps that it has to go through to get from wheat to there. It has to go into a rail car, then to a grain pit, to an elevator, a silo, a steel bin, a separator, a tempering bin, a mill, and shaking filters, and it goes through that a bunch of times. Eventually to a storage bin, a bag filler, to a tanker. Okay, so I don't know how many steps. 10 steps. Okay, and now the thing is like this. None of that equipment, except for the very first and last, except for the rail car at the beginning and the tanker truck at the end, none of that equipment is ever cleaned with water, ever. Okay, because first of all, there's no need, because what's flour, just sit around a little bit, it'll go into the next batch, no problem. And if you put water into it, it'll turn into dough, and it'll be impossible to clean out. Okay, there's no way to clean out, and they have no reason to. So it never ever touch water in any of these places. Okay, so the problem is, if you don't put any water into it, you're going to obviously be left with kernels left in certain places and dustings in other places, and it's going to be there. So that tiny bit that's left is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, and it's going to be mixed into your flour. So you have a Davar Sheyesh Matirim, can't be Bitul. So that's the problem. And the same thing's for pearling of barley. Doesn't have as many steps, but for pearling of barley, the same thing. They don't clean the equipment in between one thing and the next. There could be whole pieces of barley or just little bits of dusting in there that'll come into your food. And that's our question. It's Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Okay. So last time when we spoke about malt, one of the student to be maker was that it's not a Davar Sheyesh Matirim because it's chametz. Malt is definitely chametz, and since it's chametz, it's not yesh Matirim, because before the time comes that it'll become mutter, which is on the first day of Chol Pesach, before then it'll have already been chametz, and you won't be able to eat it. Okay, now that's, we spoke with a different studim of that, and I'm just going to say quickly is that I mentioned then that that only would help if it belongs to a yid. If it belongs to a guy, you go to, I don't know, ADM, and they're making flour. They don't have this issue that it's going to become chametz stick, that you won't be able to eat it, and it won't become chametz at all. So it is a Davar Sheyesh Matirim. So it's not a great heter. The fact that it's chametz is not going to help us. Seemingly, is not going to help us. Like we said last time, it's not going to help us over here either. Okay, but let's talk about the other possibilities and see if we can come up with a reason why it should, how it's mutter, if it's mutter, and how it's like this. Okay, so when we spoke about malt, I told you there was one big tzad to be makel was that the malt is always min b'she'enim mino into whatever you put it into. Okay, if you put, let's say, malt into your flour or malt into your Rice Krispies, it's min b'she'enim mino, and the rule is that Davar Sheyesh Matirim is only not bottled if it's min b'mino. Okay, that was a big tzad to be makel because it's min b'she'enim mino. Okay, now that seemingly that seems like a worthless idea over here by us, because here we're talking about flour being mixed into flour or barley being mixed into barley. It's as much min b'mina as could ever possibly be, right? We're talking about little bits of flour in the equipment getting mixed in. Okay, so Rabbi Gersten had an idea. He had this very interesting idea of why you shouldn't have to worry about it. It should be considered min b'she'enim. And he said like this. He said when you harvest a field, you don't just get wheat kernels in your thing. You get lots of other stuff gets mixed in, pieces of the plant and dirt and rocks, all kinds of stuff gets mixed in. Now the processors do lots and lots to get rid of every bit of all that stuff in. You don't want rocks in your flour, etc. So they do lots and lots of work to get rid of everything. He says, but they tell him it's impossible to get rid of 100%. There will always be the tiniest bits of other stuff mixed in there. Okay, that's fine. It's all fine. They did as much as they could. So he said, as well, if there's a tiny bit, let's use it, the idea of dirt, the tiny bit of dirt mixed into the flour. So that the tiny bit of dirt that's in the flour is min b'she'enim mino with flour, because it's dirt versus flour. So we could even though the chadash flour can't be bottled into the Yoshon flour, but the chadash flour could be bottled into the dirt that's in there. It's min b'she'enim mino, and it can be bottled into the dirt. So he says, wait, let me just finish one more second. Let me just finish what I'm saying. He says, and the din is, we say Salek as mino k'misha einai. So we can ignore the, Salek says we can ignore the min b'mina part of it, and let the min b'she'enim mina be mevatel. This is thought. Yes, what do you want to say?
So I understand how this is going to work. So I'm looking at a storage bin. Okay, it ran through, I don't know what, it ran through Kaddish flour.
Right.
Okay, and it's not clean. It's not water. It washed with water. Right, so they blow it out, whatever they do with it, and before I'm going to put it in my Yoshon, I go in there and I look, and I go like this, it's flour. You're telling me, they can't get out of these pieces of dirt. There's individual pieces, large, things of dirt, but I just picked up flour over here. This is flour.
But
so
no.
To say that thing, you got to have a uniform mix. And say there's mino and eina mino, and it's all mushed together, and the eina, but I can identify flour right here. That's not bottled. It's going to identify flour, and I'm smooshing,
Okay, so let me say that in a bunch of different ways. The first thing, I'm going to say different, a little different than you. Okay, the first like this. We're making this hashar over here. Remember that in order to be mevatel it has to be 60 times as much heter as issur. Okay, well, no one has any idea how much dirt is left in the thing. Remember, the guys do everything they can to get it all out. They take this very seriously. So we're making a hashara that there's 60 times as much dirt, as there is issur. Okay, now not only do they work very hard to get rid of all the heter, so to speak, the dirt, but also this. I just told you 10 places where issur could be left behind. Okay, there's a lot of places where it could be left behind. Okay, so who could figure out that how much, if there's even more heter than issur? Who has any idea how much dirt is left behind versus how many pieces of wheat are left in this conveyor or in this bin or this and that? Who has any idea how to make that? It's a hashara that we have to somehow make up. You know what I mean? That's one thing. And the second thing is there's a halach angle of the question. Halach angle of the question. And that is like this. When you pick up a bag of flour, did anybody who picks up a bag of flour, in this bag of flour, there's a tiny, tiny bit of dirt. Okay? And that tiny bit of dirt is something that somebody worked very hard to get rid of it. Okay? What's left behind? Should we call that dirt? Or should we say that what's left behind is flour? Basically, that's flour. Flour means is when you take wheat kernels and you grind them up, and what's left behind, if there's a little bit of, so to speak, dirt mixed into there, it's not another thing. It's not mino and einoi mino. Okay, it's one thing. What it is now is flour, which is, I don't know exactly what you meant before when you said, when you put your finger in and you touch flour.
What you say, nothing to what I'm saying.
When you because when you put your finger and you touch flour, he would say is, you're not seeing flour, you're seeing what looks like flour, but there's tiny bits of dirt mixed into there also. So I'm saying is just like you thought when you put your finger in and you see flour on here, you're saying I'm seeing flour, because why? Because the dirt that's in there is so nothing. It's just part of the flour. Okay, it is flour.
They're talking about granules of identifiable dirt is what they mean. They don't mean, well, microscopically when I go in my flour there's other things. They don't mean that. They mean there's pieces. There's a foreign matter that technically you could probably see with the naked eye, or as a granule of something else. That's why they can't get that out.
Did you ever see that? Did you ever pick up a bag of flour and you opened it up and said, "Whoa, I see it"? No, you never saw pieces of dirt.
Because I don't watch flour all day long. They do a good job. They do a really good job. So but I imagine some of it.
So you think this? Okay, so then I would say then there's zero left. Okay. I'm saying from a halachic side that I think that all stuff is dirt. Dugmo davar is, it's not the same, but it's a dugmo to that. Is Prima Gordon says that when the certain bugs are not issur until they walk. Okay? Until they walk, they're not issur. Well, where they are, if they never move off the plant, they're not issur. Okay, so the Prima Gordon says pshat is that until it moves, it's considered vegetable. Okay, when it first moves, in order to make it issur mitchilas briose, when the first time it moves, now it became separate from the vegetable. Until then, it's considered vegetable. Of course, it's not vegetable; it's a bug. But the din says lamais is at this point until it moves. The din says that's considered vegetable. That's dugma to the thing. Now, I have to tell you, I'm not going to get into it. He had some rayas why he thought he was right. Why he thought he was right. I wasn't convinced. Okay, so you'll have to read my footnote at a different time.
Are they saying about that?
So I'm going to tell you other svaras to be made up. Other svaras. Okay, now I wasn't so convinced by it. Okay, anyhow, but now there's another possibility, another way to say salek to maybe make it mutter, and that is this is a more solid way to say salek, and that is like this: let's say I make cookies out of this flour, so I put in this much flour. But no one eats flour by itself. You always put in other stuff when you're going to use the flour. You're going to put in water and oil and chocolate and however you make your cookies, you can put all those other things into that. Well, all those other things are min b'she'ein with the tiny bit of chadash that was left in my flour. My flour had, it's basically, I put in a whole cup of flour, of which there's a tiny little bit of something else, of the chadash that's in there, of the chadash that's in there, and together my chocolate and the oil and everything else is easy to say salek on that, because there's always things. When I make chalent, I put the barley into my chalent. Well, the chalent's got 10 other things in it also, so the one kernel of chadash that fell into there is going to say salek.
For a cake it works, but the chalent's not going to work. There's a piece of barley. You see the barley.
So you mean if there would be actually a piece of barley, if the I'm not sure.
For flour works great. For
flour. And so let's say for barley. So what do we have?
Barley. I've seen the barley.
So no, it's.
So what's the problem with barley? Barley is big pieces. Pearl barley is big pieces. So what's the problem that it's not bottled?
First of all, because dustings of the pieces that flaked off from the last barley.
Oh, okay.
But also, whole pieces of barley could be in there. The machine could have a whole piece of barley into it. Unless you flush it out, you're not going to get every last piece of barley. Barley's little pieces, so you're not going to get every piece out. Every time you get, certain ones get left behind. It's a think about using a grinder and you don't clean it.
Yeah, so that's not going to work. So then that's not going to work in the Yoshon because it's pieces of barley. Nothing else is in the taruvas. I see this barley all over the place. And one of them is one piece of barley is issur, or whatever. It's not bottle. If it's in there, it's not bottle because identify the pieces of barley.
No, so it's yavish. So it's.
But the only in the taruvas is not the potatoes and not the beans. In this taruvas, barley is pieces of barley.
The potatoes don't count into the taruvas. You're saying. Because they're not part of. We know that the potatoes are not barley. That's not. So the taruvas is barley versus barley. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't think of it like that. Okay, but I'll just remind you that last time we spoke about this, there's two terutzim and toises we spoke about last time about maybe we should say it's a din from tchumen that maybe when you put things in as a recipe together, that's always automatically considered min b'mino. In tchumen, that's the din. Two terutzim and toises is that is it a special chumrah for tchumen, but other places otherwise it's considered min b'she'ein mina. Or Taisa says another tzad that no, it's a din all over the place. It's considered min b'mino since you put it since in the so I think the way I understand it is since in the end it's going to be a cookie, so it's all considered so to speak cookie. It's not any more flour and chocolate and oil. It's considered cookie and it's all considered min b'mino. And the Achronim have machlokes about that. The Taz and Shach are machmir and the Magen Avraham is makel about that. So if that would be true, then this idea to say Salek and say it's min b'she'ein mina is not going to work for us. Okay, that wouldn't work for us. Okay. Now another possibility to reason it's like this. Another a min b'she'ein mina idea. And this is Rebelsky's idea. He said like this. He said, "I'll tell you why it's min b'she'ein mina." He says the Shach says that when anything that's almost everything that's issur b'mashehu has a kula that we say Trei Mashehu lo. Okay, a mashehu when something is bottled into something else, and issur b'mashehu mean even the tiniest bit is bottled only one time. If a little bit of that gets poured into another thing, it takes some of it out to that thing. So now it would have to be a mashehu of a mashehu, so to speak. Then Trei Mashehu lo. Okay, that's such a rule that usually applies almost always. And the Shach says, "I'll tell you what the shot in that rule is." Okay, I'm going to try to explain it even though I don't fully understand it. He says is that when you mix, let's say, chadash flour into Yoshon flour, he says it's min b'mino because flour and flour, that's min b'mino. He says, but then when you take a little bit of this mixture and put it into something else, this mixture is the fact that it has chadash and Yoshon into it makes it already sort of eino mino into the next flour that it's going into. I'm not exactly sure why. Right? When it was chadash into Yoshon, it was min b'mino. Chadash and Yoshon mixed together into Yoshon is somehow min b'she'ein mina. I'm not sure why.
I don't understand it at all.
I don't understand it either. So the fact that this is a mixture of chadash and Yoshon makes it different from the Yoshon that it's falling into. Okay, I could get that a little bit, but I don't understand because a minute ago when it was pure chadash falling into it, it was considered min b'mino. Right. So I don't know. So we just have to believe it. You can look up the Shach yourself. The end of the day is what we want, which is the Shach says it's considered. The reason why it doesn't work is because it's min b'she'ein mina. That's his point. It's min b'she'ein mina. The Shach says lafkamina is there are certain things that are issur b'mashehu even min b'mino, even min b'she'ein mina, like chametz and pesach. So the Trei Mashehu will be issur. That's the Shach's point. He says it's only going to be it's only mutter because it's min b'she'ein mina. Things where min b'she'ein is not a heter, it's not going to work. Okay, so what Shach meant, I'm not sure. So Rebelsky said over here we could say the same thing also. He said, I'll tell you what we do. After they make the chadash flour, let's say they ran chadash flour. We'll run through the machinery some Yoshon flour, and that Yoshon flour we won't sell as Yoshon. Okay, so now the Yoshon that was the chadash that was in there got mixed into ours, and then some of the mixture got so to speak stuck back onto the walls. And now, when some of that mixture falls into the new Yoshon that we will sell as Yoshon, now it's a second Mashehu. It's Trei Mashehu. So I could be makel because it's Trei Mashehu and Trei Mashehu lo mina. And so I mentioned the Shach who says it's because of min b'she'ein mina. If we don't understand, I don't care. That the Shach says such a kula that Trei Mashehu lo mina, and it has something to do with min b'she'ein mina, and that's a kula we could be makel. That's what Rebelsky said. So, two questions on that. One is that works well for equipment where what you're assuming is going to happen is that let me say it like this: the Yoshon is going to fill the equipment or pass through let's say a mill where they grind this stuff. The whole thing is going to be filled with flour. So all the chadash is seemingly going to be pulled into this mixture. Some of it will get restuck back onto the walls. So the stuff that gets stuck on is already a teruvis, and then it gets mixed into ours. It's a Trei Mashehu. Okay, but not everything is that where everything will be scraped off the wall. Think about a bin of flour or of wheat. The bin holds 100 pounds. Let's say it doesn't. 100,000. Let's use a number. 100 pounds. If I fill it up 60 pounds, then the top half of it is never going to get touched at all. So we're not going to pull off all the dust off the sides of the thing if I run things through a conveyor. So I don't touch every spot when I run through a conveyor. Some of the stuff gets pulled along, and some of the stuff gets behind. What I'm saying is that we might not get, some of the stuff may not get into the teruvas altogether, not get mixed into the first mash also. Some of the original might be getting into my Yoshon, not just from mixture. But so you could try, and in a mill you could do it. In the actual mill and the sifters you could do that, but the other equipment you cannot do it. That's not what happens. They don't fill them to the tippy top. That's not in practice what's going on. No one's filling it like that. So they're running through stuff. They run through a batch. It sounds like a lot, 10,000 pounds. You know what I mean? But 10,000 pounds is not so much for this. And they're not filling up bins. None of this stuff is being like that.
Is at least the Safek?
Okay, I'm going to get to Safek in a second. Okay. Now another thing, another question that was on a practical level. From a halacha question, we have a different question, and that is because the Shach himself says that Trei Mashehu doesn't work by lach balach. It doesn't work by lach balach, and as we know, it's assumed that flour mixed into flour is considered lach balach. Okay, when we mix flour into flour, that is considered lach balach. So the Shach himself says Trei Mashehu is not a kul that works by lach balach. So I asked this to some people, and they said, well, some are makel that say flour is considered yavish b'yavish. Okay, so it could be samech on those, maybe. Okay, maybe. Somebody said also that the Rebelsky said had his own idea that lach balach means when things get mixed together. Like if I had a cup of water and I pour some apple juice into it, that's mixed. They're all mixed together. But over here, they don't get mixed. Think about a pipe. If you had a pipe, flour in a pipe, and new flour came in, the new and the old flour don't get mixed to each other. The old flour pushes out, the new flour pushes out the old flour. They don't mix with each other. Maybe there's a tiny place where they touch, but basically they just push each other out. So that's not lach balach, he said. Okay, so that fine, I'll accept that. In cases where it does that works for certain parts of the equipment, certain pipes, maybe it would do that. Certain, I'm not sure that all the other stuff is pushing out. No, it's getting mixed together. Like think about a bin or a conveyor just gets mixed together and then pours out. Okay. Anyhow, now Rabbi Yashiv had a different explanation along the line of the same idea that we should do a flush, which is flush out put Yoshon flour through the equipment and then sell that as not Yoshon, and then what will be left, the next batch will sell as Yoshon. And he said like this. He said, this is what you said before, and that is, he says, after we flush through some Yoshon flour through this equipment, we have no idea if there's any chadash left behind. We have no idea if there's any chadash left behind. So it's a Safek. And so I'll finish the sentence, and therefore, since Davar Sheyesh Matirim is only asim d'Rabbanan, so it's a Safek. So it's mutter, because it'll only be a Safek if there's anything left behind also. Okay? That was what he said. So there's a really obvious question on that. Okay, the obvious question is, it's a Farish Gemara, that Safek Davar Sheyesh Matirim is issur also. Okay, so what did it help you to turn into a Safek? Right? So it's like so obvious, you can't miss that question. Right? Safek Yesh Matirim is not going to help us. People have suggested that the explanation is that there's two different kinds of Safekis, that you can have. One is, I know that the food fell in. I know that this food fell into my mixture. I don't know if it's mutter or if it's issur. And therefore, I don't know if it's mutter or issur. The din Yoshon Matirim says is, don't eat it now. Wait until wait until the time when it becomes mutter. Then you'll eat it at that point. Okay, that's what the Gemara says issur. Our case is different. Our case is we don't even know if the food that we don't want got into my food altogether. I mean, I don't know if there's any left. It's not the same as when the food fell in and I don't know if it was issur. Here, I don't know if it fell in at all. Okay, and in that case, maybe the Safek is not issur. Okay, and if you remember from last time, this taka the Shach brings from the Rosh almost exactly the exact same chiluk about this. Okay, the Shach was talking about when we say Sfek. The same idea was that there's a difference between a Safek where it's a Safek if issur is here at all, then Safek would be count for Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Versus when the thing is here, we just don't know if it was issur or not. There we would not say the Davar Sheyesh Matirim is not going to be mutter. Okay, and so l'chara, that's l'chara the basis for what he said. Now, really, that shaila, that question about that has to do with a bigger question called Safek issur Mashehu. We talked about it not this Pesach, I think the Pesach before that. As a whole, it's more of a Pesach issue. It comes up, and l'chara, so that's the base. That's Rabbi Yasha's basis, and that's seemingly the strongest. We're going to say one more thing in a second, but from what we've heard till now, the strongest basis again, and it comes seemingly from a shach with a rush that I mentioned last time. Okay, last for the Chadash.
Why don't they flush it with like a different type of, not the same type of flour? It's like a different type of, I don't know, like sorghum flour or something. So it'll be mino. I don't know if it'll. It won't solve the problem that I'm not reaching every spot.
Right. So what would we gain? Why is that better? What do we gain by that? If we think it got it out, then wheat flour can get it out also. And if we think it didn't get it out, then
you don't have to come to Trei Mashehu.
Because
it's bottled.
Oh, I mean, if it would have been bottled the first time, it would have been bottled the first time. Okay. So I'm not sure. Okay, it's an interesting idea.
No, it'll solve the problem also with the other thing, maybe, because we don't. I guess it would have to be like you can't tell the difference between the two flours, which is okay.
Maybe.
So that's okay. No, it's still a Safek. It's still a Safek. You know, that area. It's not Bitul. It's not a question of Bitul. Question if you don't know if this cover this area. Okay.
I'm not sure if it's realistic.
A flour mill is a flour mill.
I'm not. I never thought about that. Maybe
like the most innocuous thing that if a little tiny drop gets mixed in, right?
I understand. Okay. Well, you should know. Just totally as an aside, in plants that deal with powders. Now, in plants that deal with powders, this whole shiloh doesn't really come up. Where we have to clean between again, but they don't like to put water into these equipment. The shiloh is less serious because there we're allowed to rely on Bitul, and then we have this rule Kederach HaMachabdim. When we wipe, if you clean up the way normal people clean up, the little bit that's left, we're allowed to be Mevatel Lechatchila. But over there, what some people will do is right with things that are not smash. What some people do is they'll say is, tell you what, guys, after you make the treif product, I want you to run salt through the machinery. Because I know that after salt, you're going to clean up as well as you can. Because you don't want salt in your, your cake mix or whatever it is. You don't want that got into it. So I'm not saying that you won't have masha left behind, but they use a salt flush as a way of making sure that they're going to do a solid cleaning after the treif thing. Okay. Anyhow, so one more thing is about this is Rav Shechta came from a totally different angle. Okay, this is Rav Shechta's. He said this in more than one occasion. This type of answer, and he says is that the din Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Shulchan says I feel be'elf batal. So I told you an example last time is that malt is put into flour at the common way to do this 0.2%. That's 1 in 500. Okay, that's 1 to 500. So that's what the Chacham said. He says, but even Mashehu has a limit to it. Okay, there's an end to how far a Mashehu is. So 1 in 1,000, 1 in a bunch of thousands is one thing, but 1 in a million, 1 in a zillion like this, that there's a limit to even what should be Davar Sheyesh Matirim. The Rishon Zalman says something like that also for Pesach. It's important. What?
I wrote a shtickle on it.
You did?
In the Aruch, yeah.
Oh, so you have to send it to me. Do you still have it?
Yeah.
Okay, so Rishon Zalman wrote about it also. In Halicha Shlama, there's a bunch of rayas that he has to such a thing. You should know there's Shulchan Aruch. I don't know if you probably saw it. Shulchan Aruch, who says this, he says, Shamashu ein lo shiv yochu hispashit uhischalak la alfe alofen mashuin. Okay, even into millions. Okay, that's what he says. But that's what Shulchan Aruch says. What?
I didn't bring it.
Okay, but anyhow, but this is Rav Shechta like to say it, and so in which case it's like hello. I mean, we all know. I mean, the amount that's left. You don't mill 5 pounds of flour. You make a zillion pounds of flour at a time. I forgot the numbers I was hearing, like crazy amounts that you do at a time. So whatever's left behind is bottled in a zillion. So that's a reason, a totally different type of reason to be making. I'll say this whole shiloh, you missed it, guys. It has nothing. It's not relevant. The whole shiloh is not a shiloh. Okay, now I'm just going to say something else that has nothing to do with. It has to do with Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Just another case. We once spoke about this. I'll say it again anyhow, just because it has to do with Davar Sheyesh Matirim. Doesn't do with flour. Okay, and that is if meat did not have melicha, okay, totally not flour anymore. Meat didn't have melicha, it's treif. So it's not considered chatichu iskabed. It's not considered davar sheminyan because the meat is kosher. Be'etzem, the meat is kosher. Just the blood that's in there. So the blood that's in there is not chatichu iskabed davar sheminyan. So it's batal. No problems with it being batal because of those rules. Okay. Well, what about the fact that it's davar sheyesh matirin? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Why isn't the meat davar sheyesh matirin? Okay, one piece of meat got stuck into other pieces. Why isn't davar sheyesh matirin? Because obviously you could do melicha, and even if 72 hours have passed, which is usually when the shaila would come up, the 72 hours already passed. You can't do melicha anymore, but you could broil it. Okay, and you could broil meat even after 72 hours to get the blood out. Okay, that's a question. Why isn't davar sheyesh matirin? So the Ramah says, I'll tell you why it's not davar sheyesh matirin. He says because it's all the davar sheyesh matirin also has this rule that if it's ein asa machmas atzmai, it's also because of something else that's already makes it not davar sheyesh matirin. So here again, same rule. It's also because of the blood, not because of the meat. So it's not davar sheyesh matirin. Fine. The Shach says, I don't think that's correct. I don't think that logic is correct. That asa machmas atzmai makes a difference. He says because the svar of davar sheyesh matirin is hashem techlein b'issur techlein b'heter. So what's the difference if it's machmas nasu machmas zavracher? The Shach says, I don't like that answer. He says, but in din the Ramah is correct. He doesn't argue in the din. He doesn't argue with the logic. And he says is that davar sheyesh matirin he's going to teach you something about davar sheyesh matirin. He said davar sheyesh matirin means is that the you don't have to eat it. He said the davar sheyesh matirin shaila over here is not about whether you could broil it. We know you could broil it. Davar sheyesh matirin is, can I eat it without broiling? That's what my shaila is. Can I eat it without broiling? Okay, to eat it without broiling, I have no way to do that beheter. Okay, I can eat it. I can do a different thing. That would have been beheter. Okay, that's fine. That wasn't the shaila. If I could do the other thing, I knew I could do that. The shaila only is, can I do? Is there a way that I can do it without broiling? Is that something that I could do? Meaning, it's not like I have a.
You need. Every davar sheyesh team is like that. My shaila is I can eat it now, not wait till the day's over. You can't just say you need to.
Sorry, again. Say it again.
Every davar sheyesh team say, let's say you have to wait a little bit, right? But my question is, I can eat it now, right? So you don't.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm not sure. I'll have to think that through. Why that's not correct? I'm not sure.
He doesn't say because it's a big thing. It's a terka. Because it's not easy to.
No, that's not easy. That would be true. That is true. That if it's a big to do, then you don't have to do it. No. But that's so I'll have to think your question through. I'm not sure, but this shach came up, or the Rama, either one, whichever way you learn it. This didn't came up. It came up actually lemaisa. It was one of the stadim when there was a shayla came up, which was a huge shipment of meat got kasher, and they figured out that a handful of the pieces was already past 72 hours when they kashered them. Okay, in other words, the meat went from here to here. They started the kashering the meat at this and this time, and then they realized that let's say I don't remember how much the number was. Let's say there was 100 pieces. 3 of them, the shechita happened too early, and therefore more than 72 hours ago. All the rest of them were fine, but a handful of them were over 72 hours. So they didn't have melicha. They didn't have a good melicha because they were more than 72 hours. And at this point, no one had any idea which one was which. No one was paying any attention. They knew they had written down. Shechita stopped at this time, and therefore they did melicha before 72 hours. But then they realized they missed it by a couple of minutes, whatever, for some of those pieces. So the meat that was there could be bottled. The 3 ones that were that didn't have proper melicha were bottled until the 97. I'm just making up the numbers. The 97 that did have a proper melicha, and we don't say the davar sheyesh matirin because again, either the Rama or the Shach, whichever way you want to say it, there's no davar sheyesh. We don't call that a davar sheyesh matirin. Because the blood doesn't make it davar sheyesh matirin. Okay, now there's one group of things that I'm going to talk about in the future. I'll also do sheyesh matirin, just at a later day. I'm waiting for that, which is whether something needs hagala or tefillas kalim, whether that makes it not fit to be bottled because of davar sheyesh matirin. Okay, that we've been talking about foods. The other side about something that needs tefillas kalim or hagalas kalim, whether that will be in the future.